Uh-oh. Oh, we have one signer-inner for our story time today. Curious as to... Oh, it's Monique!
Hey!
Hi, Monique. How's it going? Monique from Java Kai.
Hi, Monique! Aloha, here we go.
I don't know if you've caught us, but we are reading chapter 7 today of our continuing saga, The Dolly Parton, My Life, and Other Unfinished Business. And she's going to read with us a little bit today. Hope you're doing well. We're gonna wait for a couple more minutes to see if anyone else joins us. Otherwise, we'll just join right in. Joke of the day.
Oh, your joke of the day out.
I don't have my joke of the day yet.
Oh, Dolly doesn't have a joke, maybe.
Oh, yeah. She's going to read to you while we wait for a couple more followers. There's nobody on today.
Is Monique still there?
Yeah.
Tell everyone she's 7 months old and they'll think it's a miracle that she can read. Social
Okay.
distance.
Bryce is making t-shirts. He's gotten arts and crafty.
Social. Oh, I know they're going to have some on the shelf. Distance. They have everything. Ready to go.
I think we might just have to just start reading.
There you go.
People will just join us.
I could sing a song or something.
Definitely start reading. Oh, okay. Hi, Katie.
Hi, Katie.
Monique, we miss you too. Hope you. How's your health doing, Katie? We're just waiting for a couple more people to join us, or see if so. But we're just checking in on everybody. Monique, how are you doing? And if it's easier, I can just text you later. Katie, how are you doing this Friday? Oh. So there's a large viewership with your family. That's funny. Okay, well, I've got you two here, so why don't we just get started? Monique, I don't remember if I've seen you come through here, so what we've been doing is we've been reading Dolly Parton, My Life, and Other Unfinished Business, a chapter every other day. Today we're on chapter 7. So far, we are in Dolly's childhood. We have experienced things such as her getting baptized, finding out how poor her family was. Her last chapter, we talked a little bit about her family. Oh, yes, and I wear a new wig every day. And some people dropped off a bag of wigs the other day, and this is one of the options. They're always really messy and a little bit of craziness. So Dolly Parton's family got into a fight in the last chapter with the neighbors that ended up in a civil lawsuit, but they... I think if I remember right, it was all... she's saying Dolly Parton. It all kind of got pushed out, and they technically didn't lose or win, but it was a big talk of the town. We may have to remove the child from the viewing. Okay. So, here we go. Let me pull it up. We are on chapter 7. Okay, chapter 7. My grandpa, Reverend Jake Owens, was the rock of our family. His real name, Jacob, naturally enough, comes from the Bible, as did everything he ever thought or did. He never had a drink of alcohol or smoked a cigarette. He never even overate or did anything else to excess. He loved his Lord, and he loved his family. Bye, Willow.
Hey, see you later, Dada.
Okay, we're going to adjust
See you later, alligator.
the camera now that it's just us. The little lady's out of here. Okay, here we go. Continuing. Almost from the day he was born, he felt the call to preach. He began preaching when he was 17 years before he was actually ordained. There were few ordained ministers in our parts anyway. If a young man felt led to preach the gospel, he just let it fly. Many of them couldn't even read or write. They just watched other people preach and then copied the way they did it. My grandpa Jake was much more educated than most. He was a music teacher of sorts and even taught public school as a substitute. He was loved and respected by everyone who knew him. I co-wrote a song with my Aunt Dorothy Joe called Daddy Was an Old-Time Preacher Man about Grandpa Jake. Okay, I have to sing this part, but I don't sing, so I'm just going to do my best. Daddy was an old-time preacher man. He preached the word of God throughout the land. He preached so plain a child could understand. Yes, Daddy was an old-time preacher man. He told the people of the need to pray. He talked about God's wrath and judgment day. I feel like whenever I have to sing, I have to start shaking. Looks like I've got something going on with me. He preached about the great eternity. He preached hell so hot that you could feel the heat. Yes, Daddy was an old-time preacher man. Aunt Leona would get up to testify. And we'd sing, in the sweet by and by. Then we'd sing, I'm on my way to Canaan land. Yes, Daddy was an old-time preacher man. Daddy worked for God, but he asked no pay. For he believed that God provides a way. We never had a lot, but we got by. Guess it's 'cause the Lord was on Daddy's side. Whew, okay, that was the end of that song. Okay. That song was one of the biggest duet hits Porter Wagner and I ever did. My grandpa did preach so hot, I'm sure it sang better when Dolly Parton sang it, because Lord knows I couldn't have done that. We just witnessed it, and it was kind of terrible. Okay. That song was one of the biggest duet hits Porter Wagner and I ever did. My grandpa did preach so hot you could feel the fires of hell. I suppose I got much of my love for God and music from him. In return, I gave him a fit when it came to my tight clothes, bleached hair, and makeup. He was just sure I was doomed to hell. He would call me Jezebel, and then shake his head and say, Lord, the devil must have made you wear your clothes that way and bleach your hair like that. And I'd say, no offense, Granddaddy, but I did this all by myself. The devil has nothing to do with it. I was not the first one in the family to cause Grandpa Jake to raise an eyebrow. For the most part, my mother's family, the Owenses, are vagabonds. They live to play music and will let nothing, earning a living, for example, stand in the way of that. We got Christina and baby Isla looking right now. Hi guys. We are right now in chapter 7 of Dolly, My Life and Other Unfinished Business. I am a part... Oh, wait. They live to play music and will let nothing, even a living, for example, stand in the way of that. My father's people are hard-working, relative, no-nonsense farmers. I'm a part of both of them and feel very fortunate that I am. I got the best part of both worlds. Daddy always loved music, but he never really thought it could put any food on the table. The Owenses, my Uncle Bill, for example, always genuinely believed that there was a huge fortune to be made with little or no effort. If not today, then certainly tomorrow. It was if the Partons fed me and the Owenses served up a dessert of dreams. I take great joy in making music, and it is what I truly live for. On the other hand, I have learned to make it work for me so that I can live quite well while I'm doing it. Daddy would have understood planting watermelon seeds after the last frost and then having the satisfaction of sitting back under a tree in July and eating the sweet melon. He would appreciate knowing you started with a plain... Oh gosh, I'm terribly reading today. Okay. He would appreciate knowing you started with a plan, saw it through, and then enjoyed the fruits of it. Mama would have had the same kind of understanding about planting a bunch of dreams and watering them with sweat and tears. Of course, they would bear fruit. It's the nature of things. It was the Owens in me that made me plant the dreams. But I probably would not have had the will to put out the sweat and tears without the Parton. Uncle Bill began to take a real interest in my talent. Of all my musical relatives, he was the one who took his music the most seriously. He aspired to make records of his own as well as to have his songs recorded by a known artist. His full name is Billy Earl Owens, but it was usually shortened to Bill. I always liked to call him Uncle Billy. He was the only person back in those days who had the same vision I did. I have an Aunt Billy on a side note. But Aunt Billy was born a woman. That's just her name, Aunt Billy. I don't want to confuse it. Okay, I'm going back to the book. I just felt like I should share that. Okay. Nothing wrong with changing, though. I like it all. I feel like I have to cover that up. Oh, goodness. I'm going to go back to reading. I'm doing better when I'm just reading. Okay. Maybe it's this wig. I just feel like a little out of sorts today. It is kind of an out of sorts wig. Mary, if you're watching, thanks for the wig. He had shown many a kid a few chords of the guitar, but none of the others had the patience and discipline I did. When he taught me a chord, I not only learned it, I added to it. I made a lick out of it, then wrote a song to it. He was impressed with my determination. He was willing to work hard, sacrifice whatever it took to follow his own dream. So we joined forces. As the fourth one down, I had always felt somewhat misplaced in our big family. Nobody paid me very much attention. At least it seemed that way to me, since I needed so much of it. Billy paid me a lot of attention. He was a great visionary and really thought I had potential. For those of you that are joining, we are reading the biography from the 90's, Dolly Parton's, called My Life and Other Unfinished Business, written by Dolly Parton. Check out that 90's photo. Backlit. Great. Okay. That was nice by itself, but for once here was somebody who wanted to help me develop my talent. He was my first and special angel of that kind. It was Bill who brought me to the attention of Cass Walker. Cass was quite a character. He had started out selling produce from a wheelbarrow, rolling it from house to house, and eventually opened a store. His business had grown to the point where he had stores all over Knoxville, in Kentucky, and in Pennington Gap, Virginia. He had become a multimillionaire by selling his groceries on radio and TV. Cass was real opinionated. He would go on his show and rant and rave about politics, usually taking a much more liberal view than that of most people around those parts. Those who didn't agree with him would spit and cuss as they sat whittling outside the courthouse, but there wasn't much they could do about it. Cass had the money. It was his show. He had paid for the time, and he could do as he damn well pleased with it. I feel like we're getting to the part of Dolly's life where we're going to start hearing her become famous. This is very, very exciting. Here it goes. He was a local celebrity, and everybody around had his own little Cass Walker impression. When he was on TV hawking his groceries, he would point with his middle finger so that it would look like he was giving people the bird. As he would say, "It's $3. It's not $2. It's $3.50. Oh, maybe it's $1.50." For folks used to laugh at the way he would point because they thought he didn't know what he was doing. I was never quite sure. Cass was that much of an individual. If he wanted to go on TV and flip people off, he would do it. Cass always told the story about the time I was introduced to him. Uncle Bill wanted to get me on Cass's radio show, so he managed to get me backstage to meet him. I remember looking up at him and thinking how different he was from the men I had known in the mountains. Cass tried to dress down so as not to alienate the common grocery-buying people, but there was still little things that gave him away that he was a very wealthy man. I stood there about on the level with his belt buckle, which seemed to a poor kid from the hills to be a thing of almost unimaginable riches, looking up at Cass in his starched white shirt. He said hello and then kind of grumped as if I should say something. I choked back my butterflies and finally managed to say, "Mr. Walker, I want to work for you." He shook my hand and said, "Well, you've got a job," he told me. "A lot of people come to me and say, Mr. Walker, I want a job. But you said, I want to work for you. You're hired because you're the first one that's ever wanted to work." I started out singing on the radio. The show was broadcast live in the middle of the day from the little auditorium there on the radio station. WIVK in Knoxville. There was room for an audience of about 60 or so, and people would crowd in off the streets when the show started. When time came from the first show, I stood there backstage with my Uncle Bill, trying to breathe. It's funny how, when you're nervous, even a normal bodily function requires worry and effort. I could hear the sound of the people kind of buzzing out there, waiting for something to happen. It was at that very moment that everything came to a head for me as a performer. My insecurity came face to face with my ambition. My shyness banged head on into my need for attention. This was what I had always wanted, and yet there was this fear. I'm not quite sure if it was the fear of failure or of success. Maybe it was both. I was either going to do this thing. Where am I at? I was either going to do this thing and do it for the rest of my life or not at all. I was introduced. I looked at Uncle Bill. He looked back as if to say, I can't help you now. I knew it was up to me. Ooh, I wonder if she's going to sink or swim. I know we know the future, but in this moment, is she going to sink or swim? Let me get a sip of hot water. Okay. Somehow, I walked out to the front to that microphone and began to sing. My voice was thin and tentative at first, but I got more and more confident as I went along. By the last verse, I was belting the song out of the top of my lungs, singing with joy just by the way. I had done on the top of the woodpile. I sang as if I would be my only chance ever to sing for a crowd like this or on the radio. For all I knew, it could be the last time. I finished my song and the crowd exploded with approval. They cheered and clapped and stomped their feet. It was as if they were saying, yes, yes, Dolly, we love your singing. Yes, Dolly, we love you. And this time, they didn't crawl away. At that very moment, I fell in love with the public. This was what I had always wanted. No, needed. It was the attention I had longed for. I knew what they were giving me. I had confidence in what I had to give them. They shouted for an encore. I didn't have one. I had only prepared the one song. I looked at Uncle Bill, who was on stage with me, grinning like a mule, eating sawbriars from behind his big red electric guitar. I couldn't hear him over the crowd, but I could see his lips forming the words, "Sing it again." I did. They loved it again. So did I. I finally knew what a star was. I wasn't one yet, but I knew that I would be, and that I would have the love affair with the public for the rest of my life. Looking back, that audience was probably Looking back, that audience probably responded to me as much because I was 10 years old as out of admiration for whatever talent I had. I'm going to move my chair. Okay, now I can sit up tall. But it was just the boost I needed to keep me on the road to my dream. I sang on television before my family ever owned one. I used to get $5 a show, and I thought that was really big money. When you consider that my daddy would sometimes work all day in a sawmill for the same money, it was. After I had been on for a while, Cass would take me with him when he took his show to different towns around the area. I remember playing at the Pines Theater in Sevierville. I'm not sure, but I said it. That was like playing for my own home folks, and I was really proud. Cass would do all kinds of stunts to bring people to the shows and ultimately into his grocery stores. He used to have what was called a greasy pole. It was like a telephone pole that had been sanded down real smooth and then greased up with lard. It was as slick as a $2 lawyer and almost impossible to climb. At the top of the greasy pole was a cash prize for anybody who could reach it. I decided to give the greasy pole a try. Oh, I think we have Alan joining us from El Segundo. Alan, we're reading Chapter 7 of Dolly, My Life and Other Unfinished Business. We've been reading a chapter every other day. And you're just joining us when Dolly Parton got her start, officially, singing radio. Okay, so I was still pretty much a tomboy then. I felt confident in my climbing ability, but I also had a plan. First, I got myself good and wet, then went out onto the parking lot and rolled around in the dirt. I thought if I could get enough sand and dirt stuck to me, it would give me a better traction going up the pole. When my turn came, I ran over to the pole and started up. A few people laughed and must have thought, "Who is that dirty kid?" But as I began to make headway up that pole, the laughter turned into shouts of encouragement. With all the grit I could muster, including that stuck to my jeans, I shinnied up that pole and triumphantly brought down the prize, $250. The cheers of the crowd soon turned into disgruntled muttering. Somebody here recognized me as one of the performers on the show, and this created quite an outrage. People were angry that I had won the money. Not only had I used what they considered to be an unfair advantage, but in their minds, I shouldn't have been eligible. They began to cry that the whole thing had been fixed. That was when Cass Walker showed me what a high-minded, strong-willed individual he really was. How could a greasy pole be fixed? Dolly Parton just climbed a greasy pole. If you're just tuning in, I see some people just tuned in. How could a greasy pole be fixed? He shouted down the crowd. Either you can climb the damn thing or you can't. He went on. Nobody said you couldn't roll in the dirt. If this young lady is smart enough to do that, she deserves the money. Hell, it's my money. I didn't expect to have to give it away at all. This girl has taught me something today, and that in itself is worth $250. With that, he shook my hand, and the crowd, although not altogether happy, had to accept the fact that I was the winner. $250 was big money in Seaver County, Tennessee, in 1956 especially. Mama and Daddy couldn't believe my good fortune. I thought about what to do with the money and finally hit upon what seemed to be the perfect use for it. I would buy the family a television. This was the perfect answer. It would benefit all of us. It would bring excitement and contact with the outside world that we never had known. Not least of all, my family could finally see me sing on the Cass Walker Show. Until that time, all our family ever had was an old battery-operated radio. We couldn't listen to it as much as we wanted to because we had to save the battery. But we could hear the Grand Ole Opry sometimes. The radio had to have a big copper grounding rod that was driven into the earth outside the house. Sometimes it would start cutting out and whistling. That meant that it wasn't properly grounded, and one of us would have to go outside and pour water on the grounding rod until it would get clear again. No one could have anticipated the impact television would have on our family, neighbors, and relatives. There was a movie called The Gods Must Be Crazy. That's a pretty funny movie. I feel like I saw it recently. If you haven't, you should check it out. So there's a movie called The Gods Must Be Crazy, in which a Coke bottle falls from an airplane and profoundly changes the lives of a tribe of Bushmen. My TV had the same effect on that bunch of hillbillies. It was bad enough that all of these kids started watching it the minute it signed on. The station in Knoxville only had programming for about 8 hours a day. Up until it came on, there would be this old black and white test pattern with all kinds of little lines and numbers on it, with the head of an Indian chief in the middle. When we first got the TV, my brother and sisters would sit and watch that for a long time until the station would sign on. There were cartoons and things in the afternoon, but the real attention was Gunsmoke. When it came time for Gunsmoke, the whole family would be glued to the set. Relatives and neighbors began coming over. Before long, there would be as many as 25 or 30 people crowded into our house trying to get a pitiful, snowy 19-inch black and white TV. If they had just watched Gunsmoke and then gone home, it might not have been so bad. But they wouldn't leave. They would sit or stand or lean and watch that TV until it signed off with the Star-Spangled Banner. Then that familiar test pattern would come on again. I'll be damned if some of the po-asses who hadn't had good seats at Gunsmoke wouldn't stay and watch the test pattern for a while. Daddy was undone. I can't have these people in the house all night, he complained. I got work to do. At first, he would try to drop hints. Well, let's you and me go to bed, Ava Lee, he would say aloud for everybody to hear. I think these people want to go home. This didn't work. It was as if these people had all become addicted to something that was beyond their power to give up. Get out of my house, Daddy would yell. Mama would just swear that he had offended friends or relatives and they would never come to our house to speak to us again. But next Gunsmoke, there they were. As if they had no memory, no sense whatever of being bothersome, and no intention of leaving. Even if I felt I had become a star, Daddy was still a farmer who had to get up with the chickens every morning. That damn TV has to go, he said plainly and empathetically. We all recognized that tone of voice when Daddy used it. There was no room for discussion. The TV was sold. Oh, sorry, the cat's pushing the phone over. Let me get the cat. Hold on. I'm getting the cat.
Jennifer.
For those of you that don't know, we have a cat named Jennifer. She's a pain in the ass, but we love her. This is Jennifer. She's going to... see? She wants to bite. Let's let her sit in the chair next to us. Oh, she can be found on Instagram as Jennifer the Cat. She's not very good at updating her Instagram page, let's be honest.
And available for adoption.
Not available for adoption. If you overheard Bryce from the yard downstairs, ignore him. Okay, here we go. Back to it. Her daddy was ready to sell the TV. I would have to go on being a TV star without my own family being able to see me. Now, I was a feisty kid. I don't know who coined the phrase, but it used to be said of me that I was smart enough to know everything and dumb enough to say it. That is one description I have never attempted to dispute. The guys in the house band of the TV show used to have fun kidding with me. Once they got together and made up some excuse as to why they weren't going to play for me, I bowed up and said right to their faces, "You will play for me. You wait till Mr. Walker gets here. You'll play for me, and you'll be damn glad to do it." Those of you that are just joining us, we've got a few new viewers. We are reading Chapter 7 of Dolly, My Life, and Other Unfinished Business, published in the 90s, 1994 to be exact, or released in 1994. She is just starting to get famous on a local radio show. Okay. It got harder and harder to go to school after I became locally famous. There were those who resented me. They weren't at all subtle about showing it. One day, some of the more hateful ones locked me in the cloakroom. At first, I thought they were just kidding around, but when they hadn't let me out after 10 minutes, I began to cry and beat on the door. Of course, when somebody locks you in a closet, that's exactly what they're hoping you will do. That added to their enjoyment. I don't know how long it was before somebody let me out, but it seemed to me like an eternity. I remember the dank, musty smell of that old closet, and the sweaty smell of the coats. Worst of all, it was dark. I began to imagine all kinds of terrible things that might be surrounding me in my prison. I started to feel like I couldn't breathe. I thought if I didn't get out of there, I would die. I don't know if it was the treatment itself or the hate. I could sense behind it that made this such a terrible nightmare for me. To this day, I am afraid of the dark and I sleep with a nightlight on. All the while, I kept on singing on the Cass Walker shows, on radio and TV. Uncle Bill or some other relative would drive me to Knoxville. I can remember Aunt Estelle going with me to a place where you could make... Oh, sorry, we had a pause, poor connection. We are back. Let me read that last sentence. I can remember Aunt Estelle record. Oh, wait. I can remember Aunt Estelle going with me to a place where you could make your own record. It wasn't like a professional studio or anything. It was more like a booth where you would watch the record being cut as you recorded it. I remember the discs were made of black waxy stuff. When it was turning, the part that was cut out by the needle would come off in a long, fine string that looked like black hair. I will never forget how excited I was when I heard that I was going to get to make a real record. One of my uncles, Henry Owens, brother to Bill and Lewis, performed under the name John Henry III. This was just something he made up. There never was a first or a second, but that was and is his stage name. Aside from performing where he could and doing some recording. He was in the service at a base in the Lake Charles, Louisiana. He lived next to a recording studio and had made friends with its owner. Uncle Bill had been down a couple of times, and he thought it would be the perfect opportunity for me to cut my first record. He sent for me to come to Lake Charles. When I heard about it, I was barely able to contain myself. I was walking the same hills and hollers I had known all my life, but everything seemed different to me. Oh gosh, did it. That other world that I had always known was out there waiting had finally sent me an invitation. I would run up a hill almost expecting to just keep on going, to run out onto the clouds and come down in a whole new world. Some people say the anticipation of a thing is a greater joy than the thing itself. I was a great argument in support of that theory. Suddenly, my anticipation and joy came to an abrupt halt. There was one problem. The recording studio was in Louisiana, and I was in Tennessee. Uncle Henry had sent a bus ticket for me and for somebody to accompany me, but there was nobody to fill that other seat. The trip would take several days, and none of my hard-working aunts or uncles could spare the time. There was never any question that my mother might go and leave so many other kids at home. I hope this doesn't strike a sad tone. Not ever having been one to give up, especially when something is important to me, I made it my business to find someone who was available. My Grandma Rena. Available as all she was. Grandma Rena, she knew less about the world outside of Seaver County than I did. What little travel she had done had all been under the protection and guidance of her husband. She was not at all confident she could look out for herself on such a trip. She was not at all confident she could look out for herself on such a trip, let alone me. I think that was a typo. She was not at all confident she could look out for herself on such a trip, let alone me. It shouldn't say that. It probably should say she was... I don't know why I'm stuck up on this, but let's see. She was not at all confident. She could not look... See, it should have said, she was not at all confident. She could not look out for herself on such a trip, let alone me. She forgot a word in there. I'm not the best grammar police in spelling if you've seen my personal Instagram stories, but at least I could read that. It tripped me up. Okay. I begged... Back to the story. That's what's important, not grammar. Dolly Parton, you screwed up the grammar in 1990. Goodness gracious, good thing we still love you. Okay, here we go. Back to it. I begged and pleaded and guilt-tripped and cried until finally she gave in. Mama had that I'm not so sure about this look on her face as she said goodbye to me that morning. I assured her we would be fine. After all, the bus tickets were already bought. Somebody would put us up on the bus and meet us on the other end. Grandma Rena was just for company. If you're just joining us, we are reading Dolly, My Life, and Other Unfinished Business, her biography written in 1990. Okay, Dolly Parton has just started her music career as a young child, and she's on her way to cut her first record with her grandma in a bus. Okay. They say that our memory for smells is centered in the part of our brain that developed first in evolution. And that is why a smell can take you back to a place or time quicker than just about anything. I don't think I'll ever forget the way the inside of that bus smelled. It was a combination of diesel fuel, Naugahyde, yeah. Okay, it was a combination of diesel fuel, Naugahyde, and people who were going places. The steady purr of the engine and the slight vibration on our feet seemed comforting, even to some extent to Grandma Rena. To me, it seemed like a big, friendly animal of some kind. One that was going to carry me in its belly and deliver me to a new and exciting place like Jonah and the whale. My big friend pulled out of Seaverville with a puff of smoke and a settling of rednecks and luggage, and we were on our way. As we got to where we could no longer see the familiar mountains that had been the background of my entire life up to that point, the only question to me was whether or not the anticipation would kill me before we got there. As we crossed the state line into Alabama, I remember being a little disappointed that there were no actual lines, just a sign by the side of the highway. Still, I was in another state, on my way to make my first record. Grandma Raina dozed off, but I wanted to see everything, although so far, Alabama didn't look much different from Tennessee. After a few hundred miles, the roadside held a little less fascination for me, but we were still heading for Louisiana and my first record. We got off the bus to stretch our legs and use the restroom in Birmingham. When we came back, we were not prepared for what we saw. There were a dozen buses, and they all looked just like the one we had been on. Which one was ours? Which one was my Jonah's whale? We only knew we were going to Lake Charles. None of the signs over the bus said Lake Charles. Did we go to Mobile? Did we go to Meridian? We did not know. Grandma Rena got upset. She sat down and started wringing her hands in worry. Then she started to cry. I didn't know what to do either. Should we get on one of these buses? Finally, I went to the ticket window and was very honest with the man there. Mister, me and my grandma are lost. We don't know what to do. He looked at my ticket and told me which bus we were supposed to be on and which sign to find it under. By the time we got there, the bus was already gone. Oh, God, I'm nervous for them. What are they going to do? Now, Grandma Rena got really upset, but I promised her I would get us to where we were going. There were telephones at the bus station, but neither of us had ever used a phone before. I knew which bus we were supposed to be on. We would simply wait until another one came. While we waited, we both got very hungry. I asked a couple of people, "Are you going to finish those potato chips?" Or, "Can you afford an extra candy bar?" Grandma Rena didn't want me begging, but we had to have something to eat. Finally, some kind people noticed the situation we were in and offered us some food. I'm going to take a drink. My throat's getting dry. Hold on. First coffee. And then water. Okay. Looking back, perhaps I should have included food when I was outlining the driving forces in my life. I've always loved to eat. If I were asked to create one sentence that involves God, music, and food as they relate to my life, it would have to be, "Thank God I've been able to sing for my supper." We finally got on the right bus, and this time we stayed on it. With the time we had lost, the trip took over 30 hours. I still remember that overwhelming feeling of relief when the bus passed a sign that said, "Welcome to Lake Charles." The little recording studio was called Goldman Records. The man who owned it was Ed Schuler, a Cajun man, whose studio had produced a number of records, including Sea of Love, which had done pretty well. I made my little record, Puppy Love, which was written by my Uncle Bill Owens and me. The flip side was Girl Left Alone, which Uncle Bill and Aunt Dorothy Joe had helped out on. It was exciting making the record and hearing it played back over the big speaker in the studio. And there was a surprise I hadn't counted on. Okay, here goes that surprise. Ed Schuler had a son named Johnny who was about my age. He was dark, with what I would later come to know as bedroom eyes. I had never seen anything like him. I had known boys back home, but they were for the most part rough country bumpkins. This boy was so handsome and well kept, and the way he talked was just so different, with a hint of Cajun accent. I really taken with him, and apparently he was with me as well. He was my first real love. Johnny and I spent every minute we could together, sometimes sneaking off and sitting under the big live oak trees behind the studio. I had never seen trees like that. Heavy with Spanish moss and with branches reaching out so far and coming so low to the ground. Everything was so different from anything I had ever known, especially this boy. He was so sweet and gentle with me, and he really knew how to kiss. He would hold my head in his hands and kiss me until my knees went weak. My life changed quite a bit on that trip. Uncle John Henry drove me and Grandma back home. On the way, we passed a roadside stand that had a stalk of bananas hanging outside. I begged Uncle Johnny to give me one. I had never had a banana in my life, although I had thought about them. I raised such a ruckus in the back seat that Uncle Henry finally bought the whole stock. They were the greatest thing I had ever tasted. I ate bananas all the way home. Even though I got sick as a dog of them, I still remember it as a pleasant experience. I had eaten bananas, been to 3 different states, been loved by a dark-eyed Cajun boy, and made myself a record. I felt like a woman of the world, if there ever was one. That concludes Chapter 7 of Dolly, My Life and Other Unfinished Business. It was quite a good chapter. We actually got to hear how she first got her singing career. I'm doing a quick recap for those that are just joining us now. She started on a local radio show by a self-made moneymaker millionaire guy, and then moved on to getting to cut her first record. Quite a big deal. So, as always, that is the end of today's reading. We will be back every other day. So, with today being Friday, that would mean Sunday, 10 a.m. Hawaii time, 1 p.m. Pacific, 4 p.m. East Coast. Is that right? Yes. 4 p.m. East Coast. And then everything else you got to figure out. Yeah. Thanks for joining us. This will be live for the next 24 hours, or posted for the next 24 hours, and catch up, share it, you know. And if anyone has any connection to Dolly Parton, let's be honest. She needs to know we're reading this. This is one of the best books ever. Okay. Have a good day. Y'all go out and do something exciting in your home, or if you're able to leave your home away from other people, you know, practice social distancing and all that fun stuff. Oh, I'm going to let you see Willow and Bryce from down below. Willow, say bye-bye.
Aloha, everybody.
Bye-bye.
See you in 2 days.
Okay, we'll see y'all later.